From the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, this is Politics and the Past with Robert Ferguson. This is me doing a very brief intro to this episode. It is a South Dakota Jack and my type roundup of the primaries, what's going on. But between the recording of this episode and its posting, there were some pretty significant changes in Georgia. And so the section where we're discussing Georgia, um, is outdated. There's no doubt. I'm going to leave it in because actually the events in Georgia were so surprising that I think it's worth listening to how we were portraying the situation just so that people can get a handle on how surprising what happened in Georgia this weekend was. Um, the runoff is Tuesday, so this is going to post Tuesday. So the Georgia part is basically was going to be out of date anyway pretty quickly, but it is sort of worth as like a time capsule, I think, understanding just how bizarre what happened on the weekend was. And what happened is that Brian Kemp finally weighed into the governor's race, and which I don't think anybody was expecting. And Brian Kemp being the governor of Georgia, the outgoing governor of Georgia, and he endorsed his lieutenant governor, Burt Jones, which I think surprised a lot of people. It's well known that he and Burt Jones have a considerable degree of animosity, going all the way back at least to 2020 and maybe earlier. Um, they're civil, they get along, but they've managed to form a working relationship, but it's never been close. They've always sort of represented different wings of the party, and so I think I'm a little surprised that he endorsed Jones. It's not totally clear why he endorsed Jones. On Monday, he's doing a rally for Jones in North Atlanta. It's a little bit surprising. I think most people assumed he was just going to stay out of the race and quietly support Jones's opponent, Rick Jackson. But that didn't happen, and I'm not totally certain why. Again, I think people can speculate. Maybe there's been a lot of speculation in Georgia political spaces the last 24 hours, but I don't think anybody really knows why. And so it's a bit of a shock, bit strange, and it means that Kemp's endorsements going into the primary are Derek Dooley for Senate and Burt Jones for governor. Which is interesting because both come from, it means that Kemp will be endorsing Dooley from his wing of the party for Senate, and he is endorsing Jones from the other wing of the party for governor. And so it's really going to be interesting what the Kemp endorsement does, both for the Senate race and for the governor race. Anyway, so I'm not going to change anything that we said about Georgia in the episode. I'm not going to edit it out. I think it's kind of interesting to just sort of go back a few days and see what we were all thinking. But anyway, that's the update that's changed. If you're listening to this Wednesday or Thursday, it's all a moot point anyway, because we will know who will have won both the Senate race and the governor's race in the runoffs in Georgia. Anyway, enjoy the episode. Desert on a beautiful, overcast, almost rainy Friday morning here in the low desert of Tempe, Arizona. This is Politics of the Past with Robert Ferguson, brought to you by the Center for American Institutions. And joining me, my partner in crime, South Dakota Jack, all the way from, well, South Dakota. How are you doing, Jack?
How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good. As I said, it might rain. I haven't seen rain here since, I don't know, last year.
That's phenomenal. That's a phenomena right there. Oh,
My daughter has this umbrella that she got when we lived in Atlanta, and she loves this umbrella. Like, she just loves using this umbrella. And in Atlanta, it rains a lot, right? And so she got to use it a lot. And it just sits by the door, and she's like, "Is it raining today? Can I use my umbrella?" "No, sweetie." "Is it raining today? Can I use my umbrella?" "No, sweetie." This morning when she said, "Is it raining today?" and I said, "Maybe," she got really excited. So I'm hoping it rains for her and she can actually use her umbrella.
That's so delightful. That's like I remember when I was going down to Phoenix to move into college for my freshman year, and my dad was I mean, it was a dad dropping his firstborn off at college. He was nervous and trying to make sure he had everything. And so we unpacked the room, and my dad is rattling through, "Do you have a phone charger?" And I say, "Yes, Dad." And then he says, "Do you have a desk lamp?" And I say, "Yes, Dad." And then he says, "Do you have a poncho?" And I say, "No, I'm going to college at Arizona State University. I don't have a poncho." And then he says, "No, you've got to have a poncho." And I said, "Well, okay," trying to humor him. And so we go over to the bookstore on campus, and Dad asks, "Do you guys sell ponchos?" And the person at the register at the bookstore looks at him like he has four heads
Yeah.
and says, "Well, I don't know. I'll have to check the back." It turns out that the bookstore at Arizona State University sells ponchos, but they were on in the very back of the store, in the very back corner, on a display rack, but on the back of the rack facing the wall, because nobody had purchased a poncho in God knows how many years. They had been stocked and then nobody had touched it.
Right.
And so we purchased the first ever poncho from the ASU bookstore, and I have yet to open it.
Well, that's fair enough.
But that was, yeah. I mean, that's Arizona for you.
It is. It is kind of remarkable. And
What?
I was in Chicago last week, and it did rain, and that was the first piece of rain. I mean, I was in England in March, but I mean, so I saw a little bit of rain there. Not much actually. It didn't rain too much on us that week, but the downpour I saw in Chicago last Saturday morning was the first real bit of rain I'd seen since probably October. And that's
It,
it's amazing.
it's ridiculous. It's
Anyway,
absolutely
we
ridiculous.
we know why the people are here. They're here to hear me talk, hear us discuss meteorological phenomena.
Yeah.
But before we really get into the meat of today's show, Jackie, a couple of weeks ago or last week maybe, you were volunteering at the South Dakota primary voting booth. Why am I having trouble saying what that is? Jack,
You
I'll
know,
let you talk
I,
about it.
I, I volunteered as a precinct deputy for the South Dakota primary, which was on June 2nd. So that was about 2 weeks ago. And I had a wonderful experience. We had 756 people vote at our precinct, which was a turnout of about 50%, just over 50%. So it was really busy all day. I was on the poll book. So there's somebody in South Dakota, we still have a paper voter registration list and a binder. So the county auditor prints out every voter registered that precinct, puts it in the binder, hands it to the election deputy. So when you go in to vote, you hand the election deputy your ID, and then they look you up physically in the poll book, and then somebody else writes your name down in the poll book and the number voter you are, and then stamps your ballot and hands you on your way. It's all very 20th century, you could call it.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, it was a long day. But it was just so fantastic to see so many people come out to vote. So many folks from all different walks of life come out to vote. We had a bunch of people who brought in their kids, their small children, who would then watch them vote, and then they talk about how important voting is, and that was great to see. We had a couple of first-time voters come in, folks who had just turned 18, and so handing them their ballots and knowing that it was their first of many, that was a really amazing feeling. And then we had just so many people come in. We had a line all day. And it was just a fantastic experience. I think it's really important to remind yourself about how vibrant and how strong democracy is in America. And this experience really did that for me.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I mean, one of the things that always, we've talked about this before, but if you ever actually volunteer in any capacity, you could either be as a precinct clerk or whatever they're called in the United States. I can't remember. They're probably different in every state or what they're called. But we use that. You've got a returning officer, you'll have deputy returning officers, that kind of thing at a precinct level. And or even if you like you're just volunteering as the clerk, the lady checking or the person checking people in, or you're working in a partisan context as a scrutineer or something like that. I mean, it will give you like you get just a completely different look at democracy. I mean, it's just like all of the stuff you see on X, all of the stuff you see on Facebook, all of the stuff you see on the cable news, all of that culminates in people walking into an elementary school gymnasium
Yeah.
and like
The
and it's just like so ordinary. It's so beautifully ordinary.
It felt to me, and it's very easy for people like you and me and the people who listen to this podcast who are just so involved in the zero-sum game that is politics on this, like, junky level, to forget how much of it just culminates in that Norman Rockwell painting of a
Yeah.
grandma and a grandpa bringing their grandkids to vote in a community library,
Mhm.
um, in South Dakota. Like,
Yeah.
that's fundamentally like, the end result of everything is that. And so if you feel yourself bogged down by politics or burnt out by politics, go and work, at a polling place, and remind yourself fundamentally what it's all about.
Yeah, it's just it is beautiful. It is it's democracy. It's lovely. It's ordinary, but it's extraordinary, right? Somehow it's both
It
of
is
those things.
extraordinary because it's ordinary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it just and it's ordinary people who've gotten like 6 hours of training, maybe,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
No, I
doing
went
it.
in Yeah, I went into the county auditor's office for 2 hours, and
Mm.
they, like, walked me through the PowerPoint presentation, and then I showed up at, like, 6:30 in the morning to open the polling place by 7, and
Yeah, I mean,
and that's how
it's
it worked.
or yeah, it's so and this is I think the thing when people get their dander up about various aspects of election days. Like most of this is like run by people who have gotten maybe 2 hours of training.
Yeah.
I think people want democracy to be this purely sterile environment or elections to be these properly sterile environment, but they're just not. It's just like ordinary people, like retirees, students, people like, housewives, guys,
Mhm.
or guys that are like me that have kind of flexible jobs that are just doing a day of volunteering because they care about democracy and they care about this country. And you just, I don't know, I just think it's actually beautiful, and I always have. And both, if you're addicted to cable news, you're addicted to X, and we were just talking before we jumped on. I'm a little addicted to both, and a little addicted to X. But you just get you just get a different perspective. You're right. It's Norman Rockwell.
Uh,
And I've been in
yeah,
there as a
you
scrutineer in Canada. I've been there as a scrutineer in a in a constituency or in a poll, like a precinct, where I knew that virtually everybody voting that day was hostile. And like my job that day was to strike as many people from the voters list as possible and to make sure as few votes counted out of there as possible.
yeah,
Like I've done that job. In fact, that might have been my
and yet
favorite
you
election day ever.
and yet you can still find the romance of it.
I still find the romance in it. I do. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not. I wasn't. I
Well,
wasn't. I wasn't striking people who had their stuff like and their stuff together.
yeah.
Like I wasn't denying people. It was just what I was trying to make sure is that nobody who I knew couldn't vote could vote.
Yeah. Well, and the thing of it is, and another thing that when you're as deeply invested in politics as we all are, you forget how much of like voting is sort of just catch as catch can, where like I had 3 people come in who tried to vote with their Costco IDs
Right.
because it was a photo ID. It had their name on it and a picture on it. And so then I'd say, well, we don't accept Costco IDs, but if you have a driver's license,
Mhm.
and so you forget that for the vast majority of people, politics is not an obsession
Right.
as it or a passion, I'll put it delicately. It's not a passion as it is for Rob and I and for our listeners. It's a passing phenomena like rain in
Yeah.
Arizona.
Yeah.
And so being reminded of that every so often is good not just for your mental health and your sanity, but also for your political analysis. You cannot assume in your political analysis that all voters treat politics the way we treat politics. Because in
Yeah,
fact, the vast majority of people are just showing up to vote with their Costco card, and that is who you have to appeal to. Not you, not me,
yeah.
going to vote with their Costco card.
But the problem is when you give the people the chance to vote, they might vote for Graham Platner.
And that is the problem, is that sometimes people vote for Graham Platner. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot in the, like, week or couple of days since he won his primary. And I read, an article from the Sabatos Crystal Ball people over at the University of Virginia. I think it was a J. Miles Coleman article, um, where he wrote, "The Democrats have finally found themselves in a Tea Party situation because they've started putting, these unqualified, scandal-ridden, unprepared candidates into potentially winnable races, choosing them over eminently qualified, thoroughly background checked, safe candidates, and thus putting those races into jeopardy." And I thought about it, the more and more I think about it, like, Graham Platner is the Democrats' Richard Mourdock or Sharon Angle or, Tea Party candidate, in that he is this expression of what the activist wing, or the hyper engaged wing, the sort of folks who vote in primaries in June, wing of the party wants, but will ultimately jeopardize them in the general election because he's the sort of candidate that nobody else wants. Nobody else but that sort of hyper involved activist Democrat is interested in voting for Graham Platner, just as nobody but the Uber Tea Party, um, activist Republican in Indiana was interested in voting for Richard Mourdock over the, long established, eminently respected Richard Lugar.
Sure. Let me just qualify that a little bit.
Sure.
First of all, I am not here to I'm not going to criticize the grassroots that are excited about Platner, nor would I criticize grassroots that were excited about some of the Tea Party candidates going back to 2008. People are angry for whatever reason. Various reasons people are upset. We live in a dislocative time. Things are happening very quickly. People are seeking, we got hyper amounts of information that we're ill equipped to be able to discern, to be able to make decisions. And frankly, I think you and I will both sit here and say the elite class to some degree has failed us. Maybe we don't see it as far as some people see it, but we can sit here and we can probably acknowledge that. What's different with Platner, and I could probably find somebody who's run for the Republicans in this sense, but what's particularly different from Platner is that Platner is not just an ordinary, he's not AOC. Okay. This is not like running AOC in Maine. If you were running AOC in Maine, I could understand it. I could forgive it. It would be a mistake, but I think you could forgive it because AOC is, for the most part, you're kind of your Tea Party equivalent on the left, right? Um, one who's capable of pivoting, perhaps. But I think, AOC, I think is principled. I think she's principled. I do. Like, I think she, it may be in a way like, Justin Amash,
Yeah. I
right?
can see that. They're not
Mm,
your principles necessarily, but they are
Not your
principles.
principles, but I think she's principled. She's also a very savvy political operator in a way that Justin Amash was not. But
Yeah.
I think she's, or maybe, maybe Kevin McCarthy
Yeah.
is a better example, right? Somebody who I do think at the end of the day has principles. I don't think Kevin McCarthy was particularly adept at showing them all the time, but I think he has principles. And I think AOC has principles. I think she's also a deeply cynical political operator, but She does have principles. Again, we're talking in politics here, so we're grading on a curve when we're talking
Yes.
principles. Okay. Um, I don't think Graham Platner has any principle. I think he's a nihilist, and I think that's different.
Yeah.
I think Graham Platner is a new
And
animal.
I would tend to agree with that. And I think and I appreciate that qualification because I it offers me an opportunity to refine what I previously said about it. Where in the main primary, there have been all kinds of headlines that have come out about how turnout in the main Democratic primary exploded. Polling places ran out of ballots, had to call and get more, so on and so forth. What those headlines miss is that I don't know what percentage of the main voting population is a registered Democrat, but it's certainly not a majority, and it probably doesn't exceed 35-40%. What those headlines miss is that there is a whole swath of Maine between independent voters, moderate Republicans, non-registered voters, all of the non-Democrats in Maine who are, maybe dissatisfied with national politics, maybe dissatisfied with Susan Collins, and didn't get the opportunity to express that in the primary, to express their intentions in the primary. And now these are their two options.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about things like the grassroots, I think it's important to remember that the grassroots that gave us Graham Plattner are not the grassroots of Maine and are not even
No.
the grassroots non-Republicans in Maine. It's the grassroots of registered Democrats who bothered to show up and vote in June. And that population is, I would argue, in no way representative of Maine or even anti-Trump forces in Maine. And
Yeah.
so when you talk about being a nihilist, and this goes back to the conversation we just had about, finding our appreciation or love for democracy again, that population of registered Democrats who showed up to vote for Graham Platner in Maine is, I would argue, the population that is also most likely to take that super obsessed or super passionate view of politics and sort of in that way lose the forest for the trees, which then lends itself to the cynicism and nihilism that engenders of Graham Platner. I think that the grassroots we're talking about is a very specific form of grassroots. Then you
Mm.
can talk about the structure of American politics that gives us that, and that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. But
Yeah.
it's a very specific stratum of grassroots
Mhm.
that feeds into that nihilism.
Yeah, I think that's true. Um, but I think, and I think that what you've got now, and I'm gonna, nobody in the Democratic Party is happy about Graham Platner. Nobody with any position of influence is particularly happy about Graham Platner. I can tell you, Bernie Sanders might be campaigning for Graham Platner, but he is not happy about Graham Platner.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. AOC might be endorsing him, might be supporting him. She's not happy about Graham Platner
No.
because it's a major distraction. He's a major distraction. That's the superficial analysis. It's like he's a major distraction. Okay.
Hmm.
But deeper, I think it's a bigger problem, not just for Democrats, but for Republicans, which is here is a guy who is, I'm going to, I've spent too much time thinking about Graham Platner. Okay. It's embarrassing that I've thought so much time thinking about this guy, but he's compelling. He is compelling. Okay.
He is very compelling.
He's
He's a
compelling.
virus. He works his way into
Yeah,
your
he's
system.
compelling.
You can't.
And this is part of the danger here. He's compelling. Um, he is in a way that Trump isn't compelling. And I'm going to get to that in a second. He he's a guy who's clearly very well read. He's very intellectual. Okay. He went and joined the military. after the war started in 2003. Okay. There are rumors and Reddit posts and other things that he wanted to go kill people. Possible. I don't know. Could be just bravado, youthful bravado. Fine. Fine. While he's there, afterwards, he then like joins Blackwater, right? Like, okay. And after he supposedly had his like, come to like road to Damascus moment, right? While he's serving, he gets the Totenkopf tattoo on his chest. I'm going to come back to the tattoo in a second. He then kind of kicks around, tries some things that don't work out. That's fine. I mean, I can sympathize with that. Um, he gets increasingly, appears to get increasingly radical in the 2010s, right? And attaches himself to a very left wing ideology. And I'm not here to criticize people who choose ideologies. That's fine. Graham Platner, though, he's a character out of a Dostoevsky novel. The psychology here is a Dostoevsky novel. He has picked left wing, extreme left wing views because he can use it as a cover for his sociopathy and his nihilism. He doesn't believe any of those things. Doesn't believe any of them. The way that he treats women is appalling. He he is not this is not an ordinary bad faith actor in American politics. Psychologically, he's I can't think of the guy's name in Dostoevsky's novel Demons, who's the kind of the ringleader, kind of like the incompetent ringleader who still manages to burn everything down. Yeah. Well, I can't think of his name off the character's name off the top of my head. But for those of you who've never read the book Demons, it's Dostoevsky actually at his funniest. It was the only time in his life I think he was happy. His wife and his kids were around. He actually had a little bit of cash. And he writes this book and he's criticizing the nihilists and he's criticizing several aspects of them, or the revolutionaries that end up joining the people's will later on and assassinating the czar. But his um, one of his points is they're not actually capable of building anything, but they can burn your house down. And they won't care about it because they think they're building something by burning you down. And that the main figure in Dostoevsky is like the main antagonist in the book. He's he doesn't believe in anything. He has no values. He just likes he's just a sociopath who has no morals. And he uses ideology as a cover for that. And the more I think about Graham Platner, the more I think about that guy. He's not like brilliant. This guy's not brilliant in the book. He's not like, I wish I'd looked up his name ahead of time. I should have done that. But he's not particularly smart. Like he's smart enough, a little smarter than the average bear, maybe. He's smarter than the little people that he controls. But like he's not capable of anything. All he's capable of is destruction. And I look at Graham Platner and I see that. And the Totenkopf tattoo, I think it's a joke. I think it's an ironic joke that he got, where he was like, I'm serving, we do some bad things. We're basically like, he's comparing his own career, like he got it as comparing his own career in the army to the SS. Kind of an exaggeration, kind of layers of irony joke. I think he's a problem.
I he is. And I think it's interesting that you brought up Dostoevsky because I was about to compare him to a character from a Sinclair Lewis novel. Have you ever read It Can't Happen Here?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. He reminds me. It Can't Happen Here is a book about America falling into fascism, and sort of the way that Italy and Germany fell into fascism in the 20 or in the 30s, after the Great Depression. It's a work of political propaganda against Huey Long, is what
Mhm.
Sinclair Lewis wrote it for. But the book, so there's a Huey Long character who's portrayed as just sort of an idiot, who's manipulated by others for their own political ends to get power. But then the manipulator is this guy named Lee Saracen, and Lee Saracen eventually becomes the Secretary of State, pulls the marionette strings, and ultimately decides he wants power for himself. But it turns out that he just wanted power for the glory of power. Um, and so his Saracen's regime ultimately falls into the vacuum of his own lack of principles. He just adopted, as you said, the principles of leftist of leftist revolution, of sort of it for his own ends.
Yeah.
And Platner reminds me, though I think that your analogy is more apt. Um, Platner reminds me of these sort of figures because I agree with you in that I don't think that Platner is genuinely a leftist, and
Mm-mm.
I would cite the same evidence. His behavior with women is appalling. And what I keep thinking about in terms of that specifically is this is what we know in June, in early June. Imagine what Susan Collins's camp, the NRSC, has tucked away in a file somewhere for October. This is what we know about his behavior with women in June. Um, and so based on things like that, I agree with you. I don't think he's generally genuinely principled in that way. I think that he is sort of just looking for something to fulfill that in almost a Leopold and Loeb-esque
Mhm.
way, looking for something to fulfill that urge within him. I don't think
Yeah.
he's gonna go murder someone,
No, no, I don't
but
necessarily think he is either. And I want to be clear on that. That I'm not. And lots of leftists have been capable of treating women terribly over the years, and I would still say they're leftists. That's not a that that's not I, that's not an indication. He strikes me as utterly he's a nihilist. He the other thing is, remember, he's kind of lazy, right? And that's something you also see in like in this archetype. They're kind of lazy. They think they're smarter than everybody else. They do everything with a little bit of with a little bit of a smirk, right? You can sort of see the smirk in Platner because he thinks he's smarter than everybody else. He thinks it's all a big joke, right? And like he's mostly just looking to entertain himself. And it's all a cover to entertain himself. And he doesn't think, guarantee you this. He doesn't think anybody is capable of sitting in judgment of him. He has his own moral code that he can justify everything. We've seen this type. This is the Razvashevsky, man. This is the Razoshinsky, I should say. Um, and so which is an old Russian phrase, which means the superfluous man, and it refers to people who have a lot of education, not a lot of drive, and they think they're smarter than everybody else. And it's in that group that you start to see these kind of sociopaths. And I've been curious if we were going to see one emerge, how quickly we were going to see one emerge, because I think in this time of mass dislocation, I think that just sort of end like huge amount volumes of education. I think that there's an opportunity for people. I don't want to go too far with that, but I think I'm on firmer ground when I look at Plattner, and I just see a guy who, listen, if he gets elected to the Senate, it's not the end of the world, folks. Okay, I want to be clear on that. He's just going to be a senator from Maine who nobody's going to particularly like, but it will not reflect well on him, on Maine, um, if he's
the
elected.
Democratic Party.
The Democratic
Yeah.
Party, if he's elected, I think he's going to continue to be a problem, and he should never be underestimated. Not because I think
Yeah.
he can accomplish a great deal, but because he can destroy a lot.
He destroy a lot of intangibles, of trust, of conviction, um, of the sort of things that we were appealing to at the beginning of this podcast. Um, I mean, you're right to say that as a freshman senator, he's a junior, one of 100. His power is relatively limited. Um, and I can't, I don't see a world in which Senator Graham Platner is a particularly long-lived member of the Senate. And in that way, I do think that the comparisons between him and John Fetterman are fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
Those are just lazy sort of, here's a white working class populist running for Senate.
Because I think
Like
Fetterman has principles. Because I think Fetterman has principles. You might
Fetterman
not
has
like those
principles.
principles, but you might not like them, but he has them.
Mhm. Like those are lazy comparisons, and so when you look at a Platner, I don't see him as being somebody who's going to be in the Senate for 30 years. I think that at some point he'll create some sort of situation that'll lead to his downfall. But in that time, he does he can turn politics into sort of a joke at everybody else's expense. It's almost the way that George Santos did. Um,
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. That's a
yeah,
maybe that's a good comparison there. Um, it's it's again, I just keep coming back to I think he everything's a joke to him. He thinks he's smarter than everybody else. He has no principles, and I don't think particularly has a moral code. I think he doesn't think anybody deserves to sit in judgment of him. And I think his decades of behavior reflect that. And yeah. Anyway,
anyway.
do you have more to say
On
about
that
Platter?
fun note. No, that about sums it up.
Fair enough.
Other than, I think at the end of the day he's probably gonna win.
I don't know.
Just because, yeah, just because of the year and yeah,
Have you? No,
uh,
this is actually one last thing. I think this is a rogue poll. But did you see the
yeah,
poll that suggests you probably saw this poll? It was advertised in a lot of places that he was up like or Collins was up on him when it was just straight Democrat like in the first iteration of it. But then like they
hmm
informed all the voters that were voting for or they informed all the voters about his sexual assault scandals or sexual harassment
hmm
scandals, whatever we want to call it. All right, I'm not calling it anything more than it was.
sure,
But his impropriety with women
yeah.
and his support went up.
I didn't see that poll, but I mean that's either that's a rogue poll or that's a canary in a coal mine that we have to do some soul searching on.
Yeah. I'm at this point, there's not enough evidence. It's just one poll.
Yeah.
I can rationalize it if it's real.
hmm
Or like if I were to see four or five more of them, I think I have a theory as to why that is.
Yeah.
But it's not a happy theory.
No.
And so at this point, it's just a rogue poll, but it's worth keeping an eye on, not just here, but across the country. Not just in Maine, but across the country. All right, across the country to go. Oh, actually, one last thing. You mentioned Sinclair Lewis's "It Could Happen Here," right? About Huey Long.
Yep.
The best book about Huey Long is All the King's Men.
Oh, I mean, you're absolutely right. Um, like, and It Can't Happen Here isn't a very good novel. All the
No,
King's Men, like, is
is
is is a good novel,
yeah,
and also,
it's the best.
I
I mean, I think it's the best American political thrill, like not fiction thriller of the 20th century.
yeah, I mean, Stark's a great character.
Yeah,
Beats the hell out of, uh, It Can't Happen Here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if you're looking for a great novel this summer, Robert Penn Warren, All the King's Men,
Mhm.
read it. All right.
Not It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair
No,
Lewis.
no, 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 no. Yeah, that's the primary source. That's not a novel.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So let's kick around the country a little bit. There is one maybe other kind of weird figure out there that maybe I should bring up is Fishbeck in Florida. We haven't talked much about Fishbeck because he's not going to win. But
Yeah.
here's another guy who is kind of an odd character, getting a lot of getting a lot of notoriety, and a little bit like Platner. I don't think he'd be getting notoriety in another cycle, but he's getting some in this cycle. For those who haven't
Mhm.
paid any attention to him, he has consecrated his campaign to the glory of God. He married a girl he just met on the campaign like 4 days later, um, and has been, you know, playing anti-Semitic tropes since the beginning. He's not doing very well, but he's getting a lot of attention because he's outrageous. He's a 30-year-old guy that kind of tries to claim he's some big VC, like tech or like venture capitalist dude, but like really, he's the music man. He's a con man. He's kind of been kicked out of everywhere he's ever been. Talks a big game, sells monorails to towns that don't need monorails, and then
I hear Ogdenville and North Brockway are doing great, actually.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah. No, I mean, it's the same sort of archetype that you see popping up,
yeah,
um, over and over and over again, and it does concern me, and there's always been a certain, uh, 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 humorous element or humorous edge to politics. There's always been
sure,
characters,
totally,
um, but and some of those characters have been successful, but like, you look at those characters and they were principled. Like Glenn Taylor from Idaho, who is this, like, country musician, traveling troubadour type who got elected to the Senate from Idaho, I think in the '20s or the '30s, like, was a character, but he was genuinely principled in a way that, like, Platner and Fishback, um, I don't know, I suppose you could argue that Fishback has principles, but those principles are just hate. Um,
doesn't that? No, he
or
doesn't. No, no, he doesn't have any principles. It's all a costume too. He's just trying to see what
um,
fits. He's just trying to see what fits.
yeah, mhm. No,
He
there were always characters in politics, but they used to be genuine or more genuine than they are now.
Sure. I mean,
And that's
I can
sort of
think of going back to the 30s, some pretty like, like there's certainly been guys that are worse than Graham Platner that have sat in the Senate. Okay, I want to be clear about that. I mean,
oh,
I studied the
well, no,
1920s and
Graham
the
Platner, he's not
1930s.
like Fedor Bilbo or,
No,
yeah.
no. Bilbo was a senator from Mississippi through the 30s and the 40s and was arguably the most out of he was a racist demagogue for sure. Of the most extreme type. In fact, he accused black soldiers of cowardice in the midst of World War II on the Senate floor at one point. Um, so not great. And at that time you've got people like Cole Blease who sat in the Senate for one term from South Carolina, and I know for sure he at least killed one guy. Um, Ben Tillman killed more. He sat in South Carolina. I don't know that Ed
I
Smith
mean,
killed
there's a reason they
anybody.
called him Pitchfork Ned Tillman.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that Ed Smith actually killed anybody, which is why I'm doing a bit on I'm doing some work on Ed Smith right now, and my joke is he was the third most racist senator from South Carolina in the first half of the 20th century. He's got this really quite violent rhetoric, but I say I know that because I know that Tillman and Blease killed somebody. I don't know that Smith actually killed anybody, so he's only the third worst. Um, but anyway, we could talk about that for a while. Um, so anyway, just to finish that thought, I guess, is that Plattner and Fishbeck are not going to be the worst people to have ever sat in the U.S. Senate. It's just a dark arc. I mean, Fishbeck's not running for Senate. Plattner is obviously, and Plattner might actually get there. He won't be the worst person to ever sit in the Senate. It's been worse, but it's just it's dark clouds on the horizon. Um.
Mhm.
Anyway, uh, do we want to talk? Maybe we want to talk about South Carolina. We're going to bring up South Carolina, but do you want to talk about South Carolina?
I am interested, because Nancy Mace is I'm curious what your take on Nancy Mace is, because I haven't completely made up my mind. And I suppose this is our requiem for Nancy Mace.
Yeah.
Um, and because I'm curious what you think about her.
Um, what could have been? I think she has
Yep.
legitimate political skills. I think she comes
Mm,
from a seat from a congressional district that has historically allowed for people to be notable, prominent. She's the first congressional district in South Carolina, which is like Charleston area,
Yeah.
low
And
country. It's a lot of money.
certainly an incredible back.
Yep. What could have been? And
Yeah.
I think she had legitimate chops and just chase the attention button. Just chase attention.
Yeah.
Needed to be
Flew a little too close to the sun.
yeah, flew a little too close to the sun too many times. I think that's exactly
Yeah.
the way of putting it. And eventually
Mhm.
voters tired of it, which is how you finish in last. And, I mentioned earlier my X addiction. Yesterday on X, she was, trying to tweet things to kind of like find humor in it all and kind of tease herself. And it just came across so bad. She said, "Oh, if only, she was kind of joking. She had a tweet like, if only Mike Pence had the courage, I would have won. Right. And she was trying to make a joke. And it's like, Nancy, no, no, put away the phone today. Thank your
Yeah.
volunteers. Thank everybody. Go, go to Kiowa Island.
Go for a walk. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Go to Kiowa, rent a condo at Kiowa. It's a lovely time of year to be there. Enjoy the ocean breeze. And like, I just, it's a need for attention. And I think that's what we saw with her from the beginning. And why you would,
There's
I know sorry, go ahead.
sorry, this is a tangent. I've been thinking about this recently. There's an interesting book to be written, and I don't know if it's been written. I'd be curious if you know about how, you know, candidates, politicians who lose their elections in high profile, embarrassing, humiliating ways, what that sort of mental process is like. What is it like to lose a high profile governor's race? And then how do you come back from that? I've been thinking about it not just with Nancy Mace, but also, here in South Dakota, I know personally some people who have lost pretty high
Hmm,
profile political races, and we've talked about it, and I'm interested in the psychology of that. What
sure.
is that feeling like?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think it's very hard for people. I can think of one who lost a very high profile governor's race and then, 6 years later was elected president, um, in Richard Nixon. But, you know, to lose two elections in a row like Nixon lost and then and then win the presidency 6 years later is pretty astounding, actually.
Yeah, I mean, talk about interesting psychological cases.
Sure.
Hard to get more
But
interesting than the Tricky Dick.
yeah, but the yeah, it's a great question. What do you do? How do you come back? Um, it's I don't know. I think everybody's going to have to be a little bit different. You can retreat to private life,
Yeah.
um, and probably enjoy a pretty good white shoe corporate law gig. That's for
Mhm.
some people, but for some people, they need to be back in the game. The game's addictive, right? And they're going to try to
Mhm.
find a way back in. And but they got to bide their time. No matter what, you got to go away for 4 years. No matter what, you got to go away
Yeah.
for 4 years and reinvent yourself. Come back a little better and or a little different anyway.
Take a deep breath. Get a puppy.
Yeah. Yeah, no matter what you do, you need to go enjoy private life again for a couple of years, right? Before you try to come back. And if you're going to come back, um, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I would go spend my time campaigning for other people initially, kind of build up your. That's one of the things Nixon did in '64 and '66 is he traveled the country and like his main gig was I'm going to go help other people get elected.
Mhm.
Because he had a significant amount of name recognition. He'd been VP, right? Not to
Yeah.
mention a losing presidential candidate. But by doing that, he built up a lot of goodwill among Republicans.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess
I
I do that.
mean,
I
yeah.
guess I do that.
Mhm. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about Nixon,
Well, we always
and we
can.
should. That you,
Yeah, yeah. That's
yeah,
I got lots to say on Nixon.
yeah.
I
And then Andrew also,
I would
Andrew
have to bring
Ritter
him on for that.
is,
But anyway, all right.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Anyway,
I do want to
continue
get to a
swearing.
few other things. Yeah, the Mace thing in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham avoids a runoff, and he's going to win in November again. Lindsey Graham is my absolute favorite political character of the 21st century. Um, he's like a stray cat.
Yeah,
Nobody knows how he got in
I,
office. Nobody knows how he got there, and you can't get rid of him.
yeah.
And you just got to accept you're never going to get rid of him. He's there for good. He's gonna, he's gonna be there till he's 105, like Strom Thurmond.
Yeah, yeah, and what she can do about it. Yep.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and I say this like I'm not trying to criticize Senator Graham here because I have a decent amount of respect for what he's been able to do, and in the sense that like no matter how the table like the deck stacked, like the deck can be so stacked against him, it could be the worst possible political environment for him. And he's going to win. He's not going to win by a lot, but he's always going to win. It's amazing.
He is, he is an incredibly efficient politician in that way. He doesn't, yeah, he's not going to waste any votes. He's not going to waste any positions. He's going to do what you got to do, at the time you got to do it. And he's going to get there just in time, and he's going to leave just in time. He was John McCain's friend for, as long as it was good in South Carolina to be John McCain's friend, and then he wasn't. He's an efficient politician.
Yeah, he is, and like he'll get humiliated, but he comes back.
But he comes back.
Yeah,
It's fine.
it's
He's got
really
9 lives.
yeah, he at least
Mhm.
yeah, he's a stray cat. I just
Yeah.
whenever I think of Lindsey Graham, I laugh. I just I laugh. Like he's so
Yeah.
it's amazing. He's a phenomenon.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
if he, whenever he does retire or he dies, I hope I still have the energy to write his biography because I want to write that.
We'll get
But
him
he
on.
might outlive me. See, he might outlive me. So what can I say? He might still be in the Senate when I die, so it might not happen. Um, okay. Uh, so that's South
You
Carolina.
wanna go to Georgia? Keep it
Yeah,
south?
we'll say the Southeast here. We've got Jackson and Jones going to a runoff here, in for the governor's race. Jones has been endorsed by Trump a couple of times, but not super loudly, which is interesting. Like he did a tele rally for Jones back about a month ago. Burt Jones is the
Yeah.
lieutenant governor.
I think it is notable, for context for Georgia that in Iowa this past week, you had the first high-profile Trump endorsement that lost,
Right.
Randy Feenstra, who was a Burt Jones-esque guy, establishment sorta, um, conservative, certainly, not a moderate Republican, but, not a flamethrower, lost to a Rick Jackson-esque figure, an outsider, a businessman, um, who was not endorsed by Trump, and so I think that example is
Mhm.
important to recognize that the glass ceiling has been broken for Rick Jackson.
It has
He's
been.
no
Now we
longer
should be
trying.
clear. Burt Jones is a flamethrower. Burt Jones is absolutely a
But
flamethrower.
now, no, that's a good point. He's a flamethrower, but he's not throwing flames from outside the house
No,
in the same
no,
way.
no. Fair enough. Fair enough. But he's very
Yeah.
much he's very much a rabble rouser. And no, I mean, so Jackson, frankly, and that's why I think one of the
Yes.
keys to Jackson's success in this race. But he has been endorsed by Trump. Now, I think Trump initially made that endorsement certainly before Rick Jackson entered the race. And
Mhm.
so Trump did that within complete knowledge, right? And so he hasn't, and again, I don't think Trump wants to be like known as putting his neck out behind a loser because I think he knows that Jackson can win. Um,
Yeah.
but the polling sort of shows a slight edge for Jones, about a 4-point edge. in the runoff. But Jackson has got a lot of money, and he's throwing a lot of money at this. I mean, it is an unbelievable story of what money and personality can buy you in politics, and Rick Jackson is showing it. I was in Georgia for 36 hours, and I am proud to say I saw a bunch of Rick Jackson ads. They are everywhere in the Atlanta media market and the Georgia media markets, and they're very effective. He's a very good politician. Um, he sent out I think I know that he sent out Father's Day cards this week. Yeah, and part of it is the thing that like, he grew up without a dad, right? And so he's kind of emphasizing his own humble upbringings and the importance of fatherhood. Um, so he's just really good. He's a really good candidate. And I say that because I think Jones is a good candidate too. Jones is a really savvy politician. And the fact that in this cycle there's a guy who's able to challenge Burt Jones in this race is remarkable. Um, the question is going to be, will voters who voted for what we would call the moderate wing or the rhino wing in the governor's race, which was Carr and Raffensperger, if they're willing to show up and vote for Jackson? I think they might be.
I think that they're probably more likely to show up for Jackson than they are for
Oh,
Jones.
they're certainly more likely
I,
to show up for Jackson than Jones.
yeah.
And again, and we talked about this before, but Jackson is not. He's a quote fighter. He's got a lot of the MAGA kind of uh um the other thing that like has been really he epitomizes a lot of the MAGA kind of approach to politics. And again, I'm not saying that I don't use MAGA to pejoratively. Some people do. I don't. I'm just
Yeah.
calling it what it is. I mean, I think that there's, it's a sharp elbowed form of politics. It's a populist form of politics. Um,
Hmm.
he epitomizes that. He's very good at it. But he's not. He doesn't have any of the baggage that Burt Jones has. He's new. He's fresh face. He doesn't have the 2020 any of the 2020 baggage. He didn't say a thing about 2020. He wasn't involved in 2020. Right? And in Georgia Republican politics, that's the KT line is 2020, um, the election, the post election period in 2020, and so he's very conservative. The left is going to hate him, liberals are going to hate him, um, and it's mutual in his case. But you're what I think you have is a guy who is more in who appears to be, if you're a Carr and Raffensperger voter, you can look at him and you can say this guy actually has an agenda for Georgia. And I think he's professional enough he can accomplish it, and he's going to do it in a way that is not purely about likes and alienating the other side. So I think they're gonna. I think he's an interesting new this is an interesting new archetype to come into politics too, kind of the post-Trump
Yeah.
populist.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious. I don't know that he's going to win, but if he does, Keisha Bottoms is in trouble. I don't think Keisha Bottoms can beat Rick Jackson in the general. I think she can beat Burt Jones, but I don't think she can beat Rick Jackson.
Yeah. It is a I and I would tend to agree with that. And we've talked uh previously about her. I hesitate to call it insincerity, but it's a version of that. Um we're like, she's a politician. She's a politician,
Yeah,
and Rick Jackson's not. And we live in a this is an election cycle where people don't like politicians.
yeah.
That's what the primaries across
You know,
the country are showing, and I think that it's as simple as that.
this is really interesting that in the Democratic primary that Bottoms won, um, her support did not come from Atlanta.
Oh, wow, I didn't
It was
realize that.
Democrats outside of Atlanta that put her over the top.
Mhm.
She was the former mayor of Atlanta. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
Whereas Jackson has deep Atlanta roots. Like, I think Jackson can get votes in November that Republicans never thought they could get, especially in this cycle.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, because people just don't like Keisha Bottoms. I mean, a lot of people do like Keisha Bottoms, but people in Atlanta, they have this really weird relationship with her. And you know, I don't see I don't see Bottoms. I think Bottoms can beat Burt Jones, but that's just because I think a lot of enough Georgia's a purple state that leans red. And in a 50-50, like it ceteris paribus, all other things being equal, the Republican wins in a statewide race. But if you run a candidate that is going to alienate that middle voter, that 10%, but the independents decide Georgia. They don't decide every state, but they decide Georgia. And it's an independent group that leans red, but will lend their vote blue. And Burt Jones is the kind of guy that might get them to lend their vote blue. I'm not saying they will, but they might. So that's Georgia. Whereas I think Ossoff is going to win in a walk. And I think that's what's going to be interesting is after this election, is that this election cycle, if Rick Jackson's the nominee for the Republicans, I think Rick Jackson's going to win the governorship and John Ossoff's going to win the Senate race. He's going to be it's going to be a split ticket, and that's should tell people something, but nobody's going to pay any attention.
Nope. Because why would we?
Right, California.
California. We haven't talked at all about California.
No, we haven't.
And I think that this is another comparison that's interesting because you've got Rick Jackson, who's got plenty of money and is spending plenty of money, and he's got that personality, and it's playing well for him. And then you've got Tom Steyer, who spent north of $200 million. I think it was like $237 million, somewhere in that ballpark, trying to win that governor's race, and then can't make the runoff.
Yeah.
And so I think that in like, I mean, Tom Steyer is not. I don't think that I'm going out on a limb and saying that Tom Steyer doesn't have the personality or the authentic nature of Rick Jackson. I'm not saying that he is inauthentic. I'm saying that he doesn't have the same appearance of authenticity. And so I mean, Becerra will win, of course,
Yeah.
because it's California.
So it's Becerra versus
But
Hilton. It's Becerra versus Hilton, right? And Hilton's a Republican, and Becerra's going to win.
Mhm. And Becerra's going to win, but then I wonder for California governance, have you read any of the stories about former Biden administration officials on deep background to the Post or the Times talking about how incompetent Becerra is?
I've heard rumors. I didn't see I didn't see the article, but Becerra has a reputation.
Yeah, there have been there have been a few articles that have come out by administration officials, high-ranking ones, of course, none of them are named, who say like Becerra was not a good cabinet secretary, was ineffective, was bad at because he was the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Right.
And he was bad at the secretary of being the Secretary of Health and Human Services. There were times that he would come in and try to brief Biden on such and such issue, and Biden would pepper him with questions, and he wouldn't be able to answer them. He would look uninformed and incompetent, and it was embarrassing. And so I
I
think that
just
that
quickly, I find it difficult to imagine Joe Biden peppering anybody with anything.
Oh, I think certainly towards the end of his presidency. At the beginning of his presidency, he did have a reputation as something of
He
a
might not have had his. You're right. At the beginning of the presidency, he didn't have his fastball, like, but he, but he still he could he still had the curveball.
yeah, he could Greg Maddox you into submission
Well, Greg Maddox is going a
without
little too
going.
far. Jamie Moyer, maybe.
But and
And
so
I'm
I think
being
that it's
generous, but
interesting.
yeah, go. But anyway, yeah, keep talking.
I think that it's interesting that you have a governor or like a he is the governor of elect of California for all intents and purposes, and members of his own party are already coming out of the woodwork and saying, "Look, this guy isn't great at governance." And so the future and we both know how important California governance is to the nation because California standards de facto become American standards.
Yeah.
California fuel emission standards, for instance,
Mhm.
become the de facto American standard. And so it is important for America, it is important for your life wherever you live. The governor of California has a massive impact on your life, and it appears that we're getting a governor of California who's maybe not great at governance.
Well, and it's
That
really
is
yeah. Now California has suffered from some pretty terrible governors in the 21st century, if we're
mhm.
being honest. Really since the
I mean,
90s.
who's the last, like, really good governor of California? Has there been one since Earl Warren?
Trying to think. Uh, it's a hard state to govern. The interests are difficult. The
Mm,
Democratic Party,
yeah,
the Republican Party in California is like if you can manage to get to the governorship as running, with the Republican Party, good for you. It's not easy. But if you're there, you're going to have to govern almost independent of the party if you're a
yeah.
Republican, because the Republican
As
Party in
Schwarzenegger
California,
did. I suppose
as
we can
Schwarzenegger did,
Schwarzenegger.
um, the Republican Party is not in California. They'd be just big enough to cause problems for you. Um, and at least that's historically been the case. I don't know what they're like right now. Could be different now. But the California Democrats are, I mean, they're so riddled with division, and and the extremist divisions are strong enough that like you need to be if you're going to govern with even a modicum of practicality, you need to be strong enough that you can shove down those extremist elements.
Yeah.
And when I say extremists, I don't mean like overthrow the government extremists. I just mean the ones that are going to want to spend $30 billion investigating reparations in San Jose,
Yeah.
right? And like
Mhm,
and renaming all the schools away from anybody, to um, you know, from the to nobody born since 2005, and are going to um and are going to condemn and are going to prevent you from being able to build anything ever again
mhm.
in the state. And California is a great state. I love California. And
Yeah.
if you're
Great
gonna
IHOP outside of
well, I mean, that's not what I think of when I think of California, but okay.
well,
It's
well,
an
they have a
important
diversity.
it's a really important, as you mentioned, it's a really important state to the union, not only because California standards become de facto national standards, but it's you know, it is one of the three or four most important cultural states in the country. Business states, it matters. You know, it's still an amazing economy despite what they've done to it, and it's what could be in California if it wasn't I if it wasn't beholden to certain interest groups. So in order to govern it effectively, you almost have to do what Newsom has done in the last 18 months. And I don't know that Newsom's been an effective governor, but in the last 18 months, he's been a different governor because what he's tried to
Mhm,
do is at least make a show out of beating those extremist interest groups into submission.
yeah,
I don't know that he's accomplished it, but he's at least tried to make an appearance of it and he's doing that because he wants to be president.
yeah,
Now, again, why Gavin Newsom thinks he's entitled to be president is the same question I'm asking about Keisha Bottoms. Why do you think you're entitled to be governor of Georgia after your administration in Atlanta? But whatever,
mhm,
it's the world we live in.
yeah,
And so, but yeah, I mean, if Becerra doesn't even have the chops of Gavin Newsom, which I don't think he does.
yeah. I I maybe he'll surprise us, but that California, that primary was just so utterly bereft of grade A candidates.
Yeah,
I mean, how is it that to be governor of California, the state that has theoretically the deepest Democratic bench in the nation, um, how is it that your options are Becerra, billionaire Tom Steyer, horrible boss, Katie Porter, and Eric Swalwell, and we all know what happened with Eric Swalwell. How are these the options,
A great
fundamentally?
question. It's a
And
great
then
question.
there were more further back, but those were the viable.
Those are the viable options. It's a great question. I mean, honestly, I have no idea what's happened to the California Democratic Party since Pelosi got old.
Yeah.
Like, how was
Mhm.
Kamala Harris one of their senators,
Yeah.
let alone vice president? You know, it's but anyway, it's the California Democratic Party. It's a and it's it's a mess. Nobody runs it. It's a vehicle for interest
Yeah.
groups. Nobody runs it.
Mhm. It will take a very particular kind of person to be able to wrangle all of that. Um, because I think about it in, like, I have a different version certainly of how I think California ought to be governed than you do.
Probably
Or like what the ultimate goal of California is.
to extract as
Beyond
much oil wealth as possible.
Yes, that was what I was thinking. Um, but in order to get there to that ideal form of California, uh, there's just so much, like, just crud in the way, and it's that sort of, like, it reminds me of a bunch of crabs in a barrel, and everybody's pulling down the other crabs, so nobody can get out of the barrel. There's so much infighting and intrigue, um, and it does, and I mean, like, that's politics. There's always been sniping in politics. But I wonder in California, because it is A, such a large state by population, and B, because so many of those people are Democrats, because Democrats hold so much power, that like the amount of sniping and intrigue has just reached a critical mass that it cannot be harnessed.
I think that's
Um
possible. That's part of it.
or that it cannot, we're in, like, South Dakota certainly, or even in a Kentucky or a Georgia, like, there's just less of it. But in California, there's just so much. It's so vast. Um, yeah. And so I wonder if you've just hit that critical mass in California.
It's also a consequence of the public sector unions and their role in the Democratic Party in California. It's this combination of public sector unions, uh, not the private sector unions. There's not enough of them in California to really to be a major influence. I mean, there's enough of them, but they're not the same kind of influence as the public sector unions are. And then you get
Yeah.
kind of the Hollywood cultural elites combined with that,
Mhm.
and it's like, uh, no wonder it's difficult to govern. There's just too many interest groups you have to accommodate.
Yeah.
If
Mhm.
you're a Democratic, like I actually think, and I mean, I'm not saying this because of my preferences, but I think if you had there's a real opportunity if you're a Republican governor of California. You got to govern independent of your own party, and
Mm.
you've got to make alliances across the aisle if you're going to do it. But I actually, I
Yeah.
actually think you've got a better shot at governing well, independent of whoever you are, if you're a Republican, because you can be independent of all of those things
Yeah.
in California.
Mhm.
But that's not going to happen, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, Again, we can extract as much oil wealth out of the place as possible, and turn. I honestly think it would look good as like a North Dakota.
Yeah, you think that we should just turn California into the Bakken?
Yeah,
Um, well, as a proud South Dakotan, the last thing this world needs is another North Dakota.
yeah.
Um, like, that's I can't. I respect the people of California too much to impose that upon them.
Well,
That's a fate worse than death.
well,
Uh,
I just want
and
them to be wealthy like the people in the Bakken.
um and the and I I don't think that you understand just how soul-sucking it is to be a North Dakotan.
Well, it's okay. I've been to Saskatchewan. I know. I've spent enough time in Saskatchewan. I know how I feel.
You've got a
Uh,
sense of it.
yeah, yeah.
You can only curl so much to try to
Right.
fill that
Yeah.
hole in your
Man, I miss curling. Man, I miss- One thing I miss more than
I'm
anything
sure
else.
there's somewhere in the valley you can curl.
There
There's
is.
gotta
It's
be,
just
like, one.
there is one club. It's not too far away actually. I should join it. But
Yeah.
it's anyway. All right. We've talked long enough here. Anything other than making fun of California and North Dakota, which we could do all day. Um,
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that about sums it up. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me, Rob. It's a pleasure as always.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for joining me on a Friday morning, Jack.